What's going on, guys? Calsoscoped back with another video. Make sure you guys drop a like on the video and subscribe if you're new. Today we're going to be looking at my simplified method for matching subjects to any scene. This isn't going to be a super in-depth version of how I do it, but I want to give you guys a basis so that we can break into further and more complicated tutorials going on. So first, let's understand the three adjustments that I use pretty much for any scene. The first one is hue and saturation. Now, what is hue and saturation? Hue and saturation is what allows you to bring out the color to its purest form that's on a subject. So if I were to bring the saturation up, this would be the color at its purest form and most intense form. If I bring this down, this desaturates or makes the colors less intense that is from the subject. Now, we're only going to really use the saturation part of hue and saturation. We're not really going to use the hue. The hue is going to actually change the color, because what the hue is really what the color is. Like, a hue would be your purple, your orange, your greens, whatever the color may be, from those main ones that you always hear, blue, pink, whatever the case may be. So we're not really going to change the hue per se, but we're always going to adjust the saturation for most of the scene, because sometimes, like a night scene, you're not going to have a lot of intensity in your colors, or if it's like a super you're making like a animated scene or something like that where it's just a lot of saturation, you might have a lot of saturation. So that's what hue and saturation is. Lightness on the bottom, we don't use this either, because we're going to use levels instead of this, but I will show you guys how to use levels as well, of course. So the second thing we're going to use is levels. The levels adjustment allows you to adjust the intensity of shadows and your highlights. So just like a gradient map, if you know what those are, it goes from shadows to highlights, or your darks to light. And when you drag your shadows from the left up like this, it's going to make more intense shadows. When you drag highlights, it's going to make more intense highlights. And this middle point right here is I would say it's the where you meet in the middle, so you can get more of a balance. So say if I brought my shadows more intense and I want to meet in the middle and just blend them out, this is why levels is really cool and really important for matching lighting to a scene, because obviously different scenes have different intensity of shadows and highlights. Now, what you're going to also want to know is there's something else called curves adjustments. I'm not going to get into it, but curves adjustments is like levels on steroids. So we can do a different video on curves, because you can get more in depth with curves, but it is a little bit more confusing. Also, you want to note that we're really going to stay on RGB channels. We're not going to really dive into the reds, greens, and blues separately. We're just going to stay on this channel most likely. So like I said, this up here lets you adjust all your shadows and highlights. And also on the bottom, if you look at this gradient, if you drag the highlights down from the right here, this is going to make the subject have less highlights, and this is going to make the subject have like a faded out effect of less shadow. So I don't try to touch these too much unless I have to, but we're also going to have to use these two points on the bottom as well. Now, the last main adjustment that we're going to use is color balance. Now, color balance, what color balance is it's like what you would use on levels if you wanted to, but I like to use color balance when I'm trying to keep it simple, because this is what's really made for the different colors of the scene. So yeah, I like to separate saturation by itself, I like to separate my shadows and highlights by itself, and I like to separate my colors by itself. Keep it really simple. Now, tones, I usually stay on the mid-tones. I don't usually go into highlights unless I really have to. So what you would do here is just, you have to analyze what hues and what colors you see in your scene and match your subject to the tone of the scene. And that's really all you would have to do with color balance. Often you don't have to go too crazy, and you'll see when we do our examples. We'll do two examples. When we match our hue and saturation, and we match our levels, like it's almost like just the adding on top to do color balance. It makes everything just really more unison. So these are the three adjustments that we're going to be using mostly. We're also probably would use some dodge and burn, and I'm going to show you guys a couple little techniques that I usually use to help me out when I'm doing matching lighting to a scene. So Yes, remember these three properties. We're going to use hue, saturation, levels, and color balance. Alright, let's move on to the scene. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys, before we add the adjustments, the first two things I really always like to add. So let's go down to the bottom right here and let's add a solid color. Okay, so add a solid color, and we're going to put this right in the middle-ish right here, like the 50% gray, and we're going to put it right there, and we're going to press OK. Now on top of this, we're going to add a hue and saturation layer. No, this is not going to be clipped to our subject yet, so just add that hue and saturation layer. And on this gray layer, let's change it to luminosity blending mode. Now from luminosity, we can see more of the colors, and this is the point of this this layer that we added, this 50% gray. So go to your hue and saturation now and bring your saturation all the way up. Now you're going to be able to see all the hues and colors of your scene, and also a little bit of the saturation. So what I like to do after that is group them together. So I hold down Control from hue and saturation to color fill, and I press Control G to make a group out of that, and I just call this color check. Okay, so call that color check, and then you can also lock it, so that lock button right there. Then after that, I'll add one more layer, and this is going to be a gradient map. So add a gradient map, and gradient maps go from shadows to highlights, like I was saying before. So just choose from black to white, just like that. And then what we're going to use this gradient map for is checking the values of our scene, so you're going to be able to see it a lot easier. And I always love to use this because it makes it a lot easier to see the values of my scene. Alright, and now the other thing that we're going to add is some shadow under his feet. So there's actually three things we'll add before we do our color checks. So let's just add a little bit of shadow under his feet. He is a little bit off perspective, so if you want, you could like go here. Oh, I'll show you. You could go to Filter, Liquify. Okay, when you're in Filter, Liquify, you would be on your forward warp tool right here. See this right here? W is forward warp tool. Have show backdrop on right here, and we're gonna go to use all layers, and we're not gonna use all the layers. We're just gonna use the background, the scene one layer, Pretty much on show backdrop, you're gonna use the background that you titled for your scene. So make sure you name your layers, and then zoom in, scroll down, and then we'll go to his feet, and we would just kind of use our forward warp tool and make our brush smaller. Use the bracket keys to adjust the size, and just make his feet a little more matched to the scene. See how it's going back in perspective? Something that you just kind of have to know and get used to, but since it's going back in perspective, his feet will be a little bit more down, and you can get away with this if you just press OK. So this looks a little bit more unison. So let's just add that shadow underneath his feet. So I'm gonna hold down Control and then add a new layer. This is gonna be shadow underneath. Okay, and then I will press I to get your color picker tool, eyedropper, whatever you want to call it. And then I usually go and try to pick a dark point of the scene. So I is your color picker. This is a really dark point of the scene, so I'll pick this color right here. And then I'll also go over to my color palette, just click once, and then I can see that it's really dark. Maybe I'll make it less saturated, somewhere around here, but keep it really dark. Alright, like that. Then we're gonna press B to get our brush out, B, and we're gonna hold down Alt or Option on the Mac to drag our brush to make it larger. Bring our hardness down to almost 0. So if you hold down the right mouse button and then you are holding down Alt or Option on the Mac, you drag vertical, you can make your hardness stronger or weaker. Horizontal brings the brush size smaller or larger. Okay, and then after that, we're gonna just right click. This will bring up our brush settings, and let's bring our brush more down to the perspective. See how it's flat? So let's make our brush more flat instead of rounded. This will make it easier. So just like that. And then I'll also go up here, and I'm going to drop my flow. Your flow on your brush is like the intensity of your brush. So I drop my flow to like 17, and then I'm just simply gonna paint underneath his feet, just like this. And I'm not doing the shadow to be perfect, but you could always press E and then erase what you want, drop the flow of the eraser as well. But this is just for education purposes. But yeah, you want to just take your time on matching subjects to scenes so that it looks good, obviously. So we're just adding a shadow in front of him. I'll drop my flow even more. He's gonna have a cast shadow from this light. So something like that will be what we'll see from him. And now we're all set to go with what we learned in the first steps: our hue saturation, our levels, and our color balance. I almost had a brain fart there, but our color balance. So those three. So we're gonna just add those off the bat. What I like to do is just add them first. So I'll add my hue saturation, add my levels, and then I'll add my color balance. And now what we're gonna do is make a clipping mask to all three of these to the subject, which is Jello, my subject layer. So yeah, we're gonna hold down Alt right, like on this line right here, and this is gonna let us make a clipping mask. Remember that option is Alt on the Mac. This is gonna make a clipping mask to only the subject, so only he's gonna be affected. So just like that, boom. Okay, so that makes a clipping mask, so everything is just it's only going to affect Jello, the subject here. So if I add saturation, see how it's only adjusting to the subject. So it usually works best for me that I have the hue and saturation on the bottom, but I often go to levels first to check my highlights and shadows. So what I usually do is turn on our gradient map that we had created from black to white, turn this on, then I go to levels and I start adjusting levels first. And what I really try to look for in the scene is how dark or how light it is. So see how everything behind him is pretty dark versus the lights here. So what I try to do is just get an overall basis of how the scene really feels to me and how light he should really be. It does take a little bit of practice. There's no way to just say, oh, you're gonna get it automatically correct the first time, because that's not just gonna happen. You just have to practice with shadows and highlights. But what I try to do is get an overall basis of the scene, and then I keep turning this on and off to check how light he should really be. So now I'm seeing that this matches a little bit more to the scene, but maybe it's a little too dark, so I'll turn this back here. Maybe I'll turn this back. I don't think he is too off from the scene, to be honest, but I want to make sure that it looks good and to my liking. So that looks good right there. Now I'll move on to my hue and saturation. I think he's a little bit too saturated, so let's bring our hue and saturation down and desaturate him. You see some of these oranges here, you see some of the oranges on the ground. He looks a little bit too saturated for this scene, does he not? And you can also tell by the blue as well, a little bit too much saturation on the blue. And I can turn this back on and off and check that throughout. Like I said, this is going to take practice to get your eye keen to doing this as well, but over time you'll be able to just notice how much saturation should he have, how much of everything should my man have. Then the last thing will be color balance, and I think he's pretty close to the right color balance. But let's go to color balance, turn our color check on, and I try to match this to the scene. I'm looking at the oranges again, see those oranges here, so I'm going to try to match those oranges to him so that he looks more in the scene. And I'm getting some pretty good results there with what I did. So we're just playing around and trying to get this as close as possible to what it should look like. So after I do the basis of those, then I just go back over and I'll just keep adjusting until I'm set. And I'm going to show you guys one more thing that's going to help a lot when you're doing this type of matching to a scene and lighting. So what I'm going to go ahead and show you guys is a blur, so a subject blur. So since the subject is right here, and before we obviously had no subject in here, so there's no real depth of field from the subject exactly. There's depth of field from just the camera in general, but nothing from the subject. So what I like to do is go right here. I'll show you guys. Very cool thing you can use. Go filter, then we're going to go to blur gallery and go to tilt shift. Okay, so what tilt shift does is it allows you to, whatever is in between these horizontal solid lines is the horizon line, right? It's in the horizon line, but anything outside of this in between these dotted lines is not. So it's going to be start having a blurred transition. So I like to go down and choose where my horizon line is in the scene, and then these dotted lines here, you can adjust these, and you can adjust the horizon line. So I would say something right about there, back there is where it's going to connect or be blurred out, but I want to make it more intense, so something like that. And then I'm going to allow for this to have a transition, and then on the right over here you can have your blur and adjust your blur to your liking. Now this is kind of like an advanced blur as well, but I'm just trying to give you guys as much information as you can get from one video and how to match the subject to the scene and the way that I always do it. So in between these lines, nothing will be blurred. Nothing will be blurred in between these lines. Then everything outside of that will be blurred. And these dotted lines, there's one on the bottom, one on the top. This is going to allow for a more smooth transition. See, that transition is very harsh. I bring this line up, now it's less harsh. But you can always adjust your blur and how much you want from the right side of the tilt shift. So I guess I'll have it to something of that manner, like that. That's cool with me, and I press OK. Now you can always see the before and after. Why it's always important to make a smart object. So convert things to smart objects before you start making adjustments, and you will thank me later. Just want to stress smart objects, they're really important and really useful. So just go on your layers and make sure that you right click and convert things to a smart object if you want to further adjust it. So I'm going to continue to match this to the scene. Whenever your properties go away, just go to Window, Properties, and this will let you get back to what you're doing. Now, what I'm seeing from this, I'm going to add one more layer. So go to your layer panel right here, your add layer, add a layer. Then we're going to press Shift F5. Okay, press Shift F5. And what I'm going to do from contents is I'm going to add a 50% gray layer. All right, boom. Add a 50% gray layer, make it a clipping, so clip it, hold down Alt or Option on the Mac, clip it to the subject, and we're going to put this on overlay. Now the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to use a technique called dodge and burn. Okay, so what is dodge and burn? Dodge makes more of an exposure on your subject, so more highlights, and burn makes more shadow on your highlights. So this is really cool to manually use after getting most of everything checked into your liking for the scene. So I'm going to turn on my gradient map, and our 50% gray layer is on overlay. So make sure it's on overlay from here, change it to overlay. And now I'm just going to read the scene. So read my lighting here. There's a lot of light here that's going to be hitting his head. So we're going to turn on our dodge and burn, and I'm going to put dodge more intense where this light's going to be, and take my time filling out where the light will be more intense on my subject. The opposite is to be said for burn. Burn is going to be the shadow, so at the bottom of his feet there's going to be more shadow there intensely. The right side's not going to be as lit from the shadow being on the right side. So keep these things in mind, spice it up, and you guys have to experiment and get more comfortable with shadowing and lighting. But these are all the things that you need to make a nice scene and subject from the nice scene, to make any subject match into any scene really. So just take your time on this part, just like on any part, take your time, and then we'll see what our results are. Just a reminder that this is sped up because I don't want the video to be too long for the tutorial, but always remember on that gear icon for YouTube, you can set playback speed and really slow this down some more if you want to see how I did it more in depth. Alright, I think we're looking pretty good. I think it looks pretty sick. Jello looks like he's really in the scene now, and it looks like he's, you know, just chilling in a park or something, or a bar, I don't know. One other thing that I'll show you guys too, we're not going to do like the colored highlights per se, but I'll show you guys a little bit of a technique you can use as well to help get more information from these lights. So we're just going to add a layer above all the adjustments that we had clipped to our subject. We're not going to clip it to jello. We're going to bring our brush back to what it was, okay? But we're going to press I to get our color picker once again. And I'm going to pick a color from this light right here, right? So not the white, but something really close to it. So close to this really bright white light source, but right here should be good. And I'm going to press B, and I'm going to go on my brush, and I'm going to have my flow really low, but I'm going to brush in just a little bit of highlight from that light, okay? So I'm just brushing in a little bit of light from that highlight. See that right there? And this adds to the scene a little bit. You could even try to use linear dodge, or screen blending mode works pretty well. And what this does is just make it more intense, and it looks even more fitting to the scene. Then yeah, alright, I'm not going to go into blending options right there, but you can see how that makes it even more intense and matches him even a little bit more to the scene. And then also you could choose a shadow from the scene, maybe not the darkest shadow, but go to I, your color picker, choose a shadow, and then we're gonna brush that on like the bottom side, but make a new layer, brush that on like the bottom side, just to make the light a little bit more intense, right? And yeah, that's gonna help the scene even more. And then always you can just go back to your color checks, and everything's really matching up and looking really cool. I would do a second subject, but I just noticed how this did take a pretty long time for this one scene, and I think that we went really in depth with it. So I hope that this really helped you guys out. Let's add a couple more ending things. So if you see like you have a little bit of excess around your subject, you don't really want that. So we'll go to the subject, control click on the subject thumbnail. Then we're gonna go and add a layer mask right here. So the layer mask is right here. Click this. Then we're gonna go to filter, other, minimum. When you have minimum, make sure that it's on roundness, and let's choose like, this is what this does is it just gets rid of pixels around your subject, so it's more of a sharp and crisp mask. So I just usually use around 1, and you guys see it makes him a little bit skinnier slightly, but it gets rid of like any pixels that are around him, so he's not going to be looking as, you know, just like he's not really in a real photo, because we want this to look as photorealistic as possible. So I'm going to right click, convert it to a smart object, and then we can also blur out his feet a little bit. So we're going to use the same blur gallery. So go to filter, then we're going to go to blur gallery, tilt shift, same thing we just used before. Use our horizon line, and I'm going to actually bring the horizon line down just so I can have a transition. And I'm just adjusting this so I can have a transition of the feet, because I just want the feet to be blurred out a little bit, just like that. Nothing crazy, just so we have a little bit more dynamics. And I press OK, so you see that. And then the last thing you can do is just go on and choose a color lookup that you really like. I don't know, like you're just gonna find one that you like, I guess. It's not really like, oh, you have to use this color lookup. I have so many of them, and if you guys haven't yet, I'll link the color lookup's going to be in the top right now, so check that out if you guys want to get some color lookups for your Photoshop application. And I like 3-strip. It is a basic one, or a basis one, but I really like it. It looks really cool. And then from here, you know, just have fun with it and try to make something really cool. Like you could press whenever you're like set on something to make a merge layer from everything visible, you press Control Alt Shift E, and this makes it merge from everything visible. Then you could make a smart object, and then go to camera raw filter. Shortcut is Control Shift A. That brings you to camera raw filter, and then you could do things like just match lighting or make the scene more dynamic, anything like that. But yeah, guys, I'm gonna put the final in the last thumbnail to end the video. But I thank you guys for tuning into this video. Hope this helped you guys out. Drop a like below if it really did, because that is my goal. And we can do a part 2. We can do some different scenes, since since you know the basics of what I do, we can do more than one scene in the next video. But just let me know down below. And if you're new, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Join the Discord. The link is below. Make sure you guys join up the Discord, man. We just hit 1K members in there. It's really good. It's really lit. And hey, man, be on the lookout for more tutorials, more videos. I'm gonna try to upload some more frequently to help you guys out. But that being said, it's been calsoscoped. Stay scoped, guys. Take care.